We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
What does it mean when a man who may seem strong and connected and engaged suddenly disappears? This question has haunted me, and maybe it's haunted you too, because too often the signs of suicidal ideation are not visible. Too often we only realize what was going on after it's too late. Today on the Mankind podcast, we're breaking that silence. November is Men's Health Awareness Month, and we are standing with the Movember Foundation all month to talk about men's health, physical health, and mental health. Today, we'll be shining a light on the truth behind men's mental health and suicide prevention. The numbers are staggering. More than 1.4 million years of potential life are lost every year to male suicide. And yet, too many of us still don't know how to talk about it, how to ask the question, or where to begin. In this episode, I'm having two conversations. One with Julien Devereux, a longtime Mankind Project leader, a former chairman, and a mental health professional who spent years developing processes to help men speak openly about tough stuff, including suicidality, and to build circles of support that truly save lives. We'll also hear some excerpts from an earlier conversation I had with Andy Miller. Andy is a Mankind Project brother who founded the DRM Foundation after losing his 25-year-old son, Drew, to suicide. Andy's story is raw and real, and it shows what's at stake when silence wins and what some folks are doing to change the narrative. These conversations aren't easy, but they are necessary, because whether you've struggled yourself or you love someone who struggled, what we talk about today could make a difference. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Boysen. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the podcast where we set out to break the molds of modern manhood and prove, without a doubt, that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. Today, I get to hang out with a brother that I have known for a very long time now and have done some. So what comes up for me in the moment? I'm with Julien Devereux today. So Julien Devereux is a past chair of the Mankind Project USA. I've known him in that light. I've known him as a man who I've sat in many circles with. And what pops for me is I also got to spend time with Julien doing work with Gender Equity and Reconciliation International. And I think that there was something in that connection and seeing you in that space that it grounded your roots into my heart in a profound way. So thank you for that. Julien, say hello.
Well, good morning, Boysen. Excited about this opportunity to be on a podcast with you and discuss something important to me and to you too. Our connection goes way back, and I have always been so appreciative of all the time and effort and the integrity that you do in communicating our message to the rest of the world. As the communications director, you've always done a great job. So I'm really looking forward to this. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, this conversation's been a long time coming. So let me tell you a little bit more about Julien. Julien Devereux, PhD, is dedicated to helping people and organizations transform and grow in a direction that will bring them fulfillment and satisfaction. His experience and training is a resource for people to draw from that is offered in a variety of modalities and techniques, including transformative individual and group process, integrative breath work, neurotherapy, gender reconciliation, as I said, appreciative and cooperative inquiry, which is a whole area of study that I don't know that we've ever covered on the podcast, transpersonal interventions, and sacred ritual. Julien's career spanned decades as a social worker and then a program director, primarily working in substance abuse treatment. He was the chair of the Mankind Project USA from 2014 to 2016. He's done extensive work with gender reconciliation and is an outspoken advocate for suicide prevention, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So this may be an activation warning. We are going to spend this podcast talking about suicidal thought, suicidal ideation, and suicide prevention. So that's where we're going today. And I'm glad you're here with us. So the first question that I want to lead into, Julien, is, so in your role, you had a role as the chair of MKP USA. What was it that you started recognizing about men's specific needs and maybe what was missing around suicide prevention and suicidality?
Well, what triggered it was actually three different men, all members of MKP, that were important in our community and that committed suicide. And it was traumatic to the community. It was traumatic to all the men that knew them. It impacted me in such a way that I thought that maybe there's a different way we could do this. And so I started doing some research with the International Association of Suicide Prevention and found that they have every year a Suicide Prevention Day, September the 10th, and they have international ideas about what you could do, from sponsored walks to educational community events, etc. And we actually did a couple of lodges where we honored people who had suicided and had a discussion. And out of that became an idea that maybe this is a topic that the Mankind Project could get behind. Because, as you know, and we've talked about, men in our particular demographic, white men, educated white men between 40 and 60, are at the highest potential for suicide. And the reason that is several fold. One is, as we know, men tend to not want to reach out for help. So instead they isolate and keep it to themselves and keep it secret. When the IASP this year said, let's change the narrative. And changing the narrative means to actually start a narrative. In other words, let's talk about it instead of keeping it hidden. And so we began to talk about it, and I came up with an idea and an outline and have done it here in the North Texas area, both on Zoom and in person, where we actually take an I group, four-quarter, structure and process through each man's ideas and experiences with suicide, and then do a workaround where we ask for a commitment from them about their potential suicidality.
And we're going to actually go through that piece by piece. And so Julien used some language that is kind of inside baseball speak, 4 quarters. So we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but we'll go through that whole process. Mm-hmm. I want to back up to where this started for you, and what I have also witnessed over 21 years in being connected to men's work and men's circles is I know a number of men who have died by suicide. So there's some part of me that does not compute for men who are involved in this kind of deep work and this kind of sharing work to die by suicide. What is it that you've noticed, or what do you think about that?
Well, I do think that men that are attracted to the Mankind Project are men who are looking for new answers, looking for new ways to be a man, and not getting a whole lot of information from the larger society. And so we do get men that are sometimes troubled with depression or substance abuse, and they falsely believe that coming to a support group will somehow fix that.
And what I have seen is, or what I have heard is that for some of these men who do ultimately, who have ultimately died, um, that at some point in that journey, they disconnect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've seen this a number of times with men who will, they're showing up, and then they will hit a deep depressive state, or they'll hit a suicidal ideation state, and then they disappear and
Yeah. Yeah.
stop.
Or disappear or keep it secret and not share it with anybody, because hey, we're men, we're supposed to be strong, we're supposed to have all the answers. That's the old model. The new model is, hey, talk about it. In fact, ask the question. The training we offer through QPR is to question, persuade, and refer, meaning ask the question, are you thinking about hurting yourself? And then tell them that they're not going to get what they need in an informal eye group. They need to get some mental health treatment, and then help them find that. And that's really the way men support each other. Uh, if we were to use a more of a primitive idea, if we were all walking through the woods and somebody fell behind, we wouldn't just leave them behind. We'd go get them. That's what we're really talking about. And we can do that. We have a perfect container and opportunity and methodology for actually doing that.
And what gets in the way, and I go back to what you started with, which is a new narrative, right? What gets in the way is for guys like me being afraid of bringing it out, being afraid of actually asking the direct question or inquiring further. Yeah.
And asking the question never causes someone to commit suicide. It doesn't happen.
Underline that there, like that's the basic so he said QPR, that's called question, persuade, and refer. Anyone who is a supporting member of the Mankind Project is given access to that training for free. It's very simple. I mean, simple but hard, right? You have to overcome some stuff.
And it is intended to be sort of the CPR for mental health. It's like, let's ask the question, let's find out, let's get the guy some help.
What I have learned, what I've noticed about having done that training several times now and been in situations where quite literally we're going to stop the circle now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
just
talk about
say
it
directly. Yes.
Yeah.
To ask directly.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about hurting yourself?
Right.
Are you in some active state of planning? What do we need to do?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Where do we need to go now? So I think that, and it gets easier, right? The first time I did it, it was terrifying. The second time I've done it on the phone or done it in other places, it's like, oh, it's not so scary.
Yeah.
The second time.
Yeah, it is. And we're already dealing with a lot of personal stuff in the I group, and the mistake that can be made is that somehow we're going to solve it with our processes and things, and when it really requires a licensed mental health professional, and that we really are over our heads when we're talking about suicide in an I group. But to stop the process, enfold the man with care and concern, and get him some help. That's really what we're after.
Very well said. And yes, Mankind Project, our groups, our trainings are not a substitute for professional mental health services, and they are a great supplement to professional services. So, yeah. What did you learn? So you had a lot of years in recovery programs and as a director of programs. Was there anything that you saw where you were like, oh yeah, men versus oh yeah, women? Here are kind of the different expressions that come out.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Women attempt suicide more often, but men complete it more often. And I think that may just simply be because we're better at killing things, including ourselves. And uh, and we usually have more lethal weapon, and we have access to handguns and lethal weapons, and we also, if we have that intention, we know we're going to do it. We don't want to do it badly, and that's what we're likely to do, and set things up. The other is that men tend to be have a lot of shame about needing help. I'm a full grown man. I don't need help. Well, yeah, you do. And there'll be a point in your life when you do. In fact, I think many men come to the Mankind Project. They don't say it, but they need some help. And they need some help breaking down the old structures and the old ways of doing things to find out who they are inside and to free themselves from the social overlay they've been given to be strong and silent. And then when it gets bad enough, just kill themselves.
That was a whole lot in just a couple of sentences about our socialization and kind of, I'm just going to say, man box culture.
Yeah.
That we talk a lot about here on the podcast, but if you come and sit in a men's group, we're not going to talk a whole lot about the man box culture. What we're going to be doing is just like breaking it apart one thread at a time.
Right. And breaking through that veneer, breaking through the silence of that veneer to say, look, guys, I'm really thinking that I'm just a burden to everybody that I know, and I need to go. That's hard to do.
Yes. When so many of us were taught, your role is to never be a burden. Your role is to always be providing. Your role is to always be useful.
Strong. Yeah.
Strong and
not
useful
complain
to those around you.
Yeah.
The conversation with Julien reminded me of this conversation that I had previously had with Andy Miller, where we talked about Drew, especially around the idea that even though as parents or friends or colleagues, we think that we should be able to know what's going on with another person and to somehow predict what's happening, that's really not the truth of what suicide is about. Listen to Andy.
A rabbi said that it was a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And, the thing I've wrestled with since from the time he's passed till now is, was he hurting for 6 months and I missed something, or did something snap that day? And, I probably will never have the answers, but the best data I can have, I think something snapped that day. And what I've learned about suicide, and having done a lot of reading and been in support groups now for coming up on 3 years, is that suicide's not a wish to die. It's a wish to take away the psychic ache, like in your head, your brain, right? Like if you have a stomach ache, obviously that part of your body hurts. This is, this is a psych ache, right? So, and again, there were no signs. He was a little bit depressed about his job. He had changed from one company to another, but he had appointments on his calendars. He ordered contact, everything other day we looked at, he was all forward thinking. So as best I know, I don't believe this was premeditated. I think something snapped that day, but it's a tragedy. In my grief journey and sitting with others who are in grief, what I've learned is the way to the other side is through. I cried a lot. I cry a little less than I did, 2.5 years ago. I still cry, and it's okay. I'm present with my feelings. I'm present with the hole in my heart that will never be replaced by losing Drew. And, again, that's learning to live with your grief day to day, handle my feelings. That's about as good as it gets. And one thing that I read, and there's a man named David Kessler. He's the foremost expert on grief in the country and maybe the world. I think he puts on a lot of seminars and things. He's, beautiful. And in one of the books I read, it said, you will find a gift in this. And I have to tell you very honestly that when I read it, I was really pissed off at that statement. But I was too early for me to hear that in my grief journey. Maybe if it had been 12 or 18 months, I don't know what point it made more sense to me. And I don't wish this on anybody. I wish I never went through this. The changed Andy from this experience is way less judgmental, more accepting of people, believing people are doing the best they can. And, again, if, one of my best friends literally didn't know what to do. He called another friend, what do I do? Like my other friend said to him, just be there for Andy, right? Just be there for him. There's nothing you can do. No one can take away my pain. Nobody can solve this problem. And that would, friends who have had people who are, lose a loss as horrific as that, that's my advice. Be there for them. Listen to them. Just, there are no words that can take away one's pain. Just be present for somebody.
This is just a small part of the conversation I had with Andy Miller. If you'd like to learn more about Drew and hear about the foundation, listen for the episode with Andy coming soon to the Mankind podcast. And now let's get back to Julien and hear how your personal growth group or men's group might take on a process to consciously rewrite the narrative about suicide.
So I love this idea. This is really exciting to me that we're going to be putting this out in a way that's going to get it to a whole lot of men out there in the world. So first of all, let's set us up. So in a Mankind Project men's group, he called it the 4-quarter model. We basically do 4 rounds.
4 rounds.
So do you want to lay those out and say kind of what they generally are, and then we'll do the specific one for suicide prevention?
Yeah. So that generally we run an integration group, or an I group is what we call them, or a men's group. Through the first round is a check-in, where we just check in where we are right now and try to leave the outside world out there and come into the circle, share some feelings and whatever's going on. And then the second round is accountability, meaning am I honoring my agreements, and have I showed up where I said I was going to show up, because integrity is a big part of what we do. And then the third round is where we find a piece of work, something that's in the way of us living in our mission, or something that we're stumbling over that we can't seem to get past. And we talk about that. We also have processes for processing the emotional material that comes with that, and hopefully get some relief at the end of that process. And then in the fourth round, we honor and bless each other by just talk about what we're seeing and what we're taking away from the event. So this fits really well. Yeah.
That was incredibly well done. Yes, great. So now let's go to the specifics. So what is the process that you've designed to talk about suicide prevention and to bring that out? So
what I'm really offering to any group that can do electronic, meetings, and I'll do it in person if they pay my way, or it's within 100 miles of Dallas, Texas. But what we do is first do kind of what we were doing, just talk about suicide, maybe offer some psychoeducational material about men and suicide and why they're in the demographic at risk, and then do a check-in round and ask each man what their experience with suicide is. And what we've done in the past is just kind of an add-on, is have the little battery-operated candles. So every time somebody talks about somebody who died by suicide, we light one of those. And there's usually 2 or 3 times more candles than there are men in the group. And so we go around and say, well, my brother.
There's usually 2 or 3 times more candles than there are men in the group. Yeah. Thank you.
Sometimes it's a brother, sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's a child. All of those, nobody's immune to having somebody that they care about commit suicide. And partly in this research, I also discovered several men in the project who had survived their own suicide attempt and also had a partner who suicided. So, there's all kinds of aspects to this. So as men check in and sort of deepen into the thought and the feelings that they have about suicide, of course, it's going to trigger other feelings. And after the check-in round, and also in that round, and then in the second round, in the accountability round, ask if they have ever committed suicide themselves and if they've ever attempted suicide. Obviously, they haven't completed it because they're in the group. And that's kind of the accountability round, like, okay, have you ever? And then the last round is the work round, which is, are you now considering hurting yourself? In other words, let's just bring it out and put it on the table. Now, I've been in a couple of groups where there were men who said that they had fairly recently and that they aren't currently. And then in the last round and then in that same work round, I asked, and this kind of goes back to accountability, are you willing to, and this is something psychologists have used for a long time, called a no harm contract, a verbal no harm contract. So what you ask them to do is say, would you commit to, if you became suicidal, would you bring that to someone in this group or bring it to this group? And ask them to say yes or no. A couple of times I've had men say, I'm not sure. Some men say no. And then part of the work is to say, what would it take for you to feel comfortable doing that? Now, if we go all the way around and then in the blessing and the sovereign round, we ask men, what's their takeaway? Well, the one that surprised me is the biggest takeaway is they suddenly feel safer in that I group. They now have a safety net to fall into if they consider killing themselves. And it draws the group together. They're really seeing each other as fully alive human beings that have value.
Thank you. There's an aspect of that, bringing the narrative forward, being able to tell the story that really talks back to, I'm fundamentally broken, I'm fundamentally different, I'm fundamentally not like the other men who are sitting in the circle. And I think it kind of breaks that.
Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot of head nodding, hand raising, me too kind of activity, So.
Yeah. There have been times I'm going to tell a story. And honestly, there have been times when over the last number of years, we have actually recommended for men in groups to go ahead and call 911 and do safety checks on men. And there's always a consternation. There's fear about it. It's like, oh my gosh, what if I'm going to call and they're going to go check, and what if it's nothing, and and he's going to be really angry at us, and he's going to all of this stuff. And yet every time that's happened, every time that I know about, some of these guys have been really pissed off. You called the cops on me, but the guy's alive.
Yeah. I'd rather him be angry at me and alive than dead and not angry. Yeah. And we've done that. We had one I group where it was actually a primary integration training, and we had a man who's hosting it, who had sold all of his furniture and was sort of talking kind of nonsense in his share. And so we didn't leave. We left somebody there for the night with him and got him to a therapist the next day, and he wouldn't admit that he was, but he had a lot of the symptoms. And some of those symptoms sometimes are, they come to a group thinking they feel much better now that they've made a decision. Well, the decision they made is to kill themselves, and they're not sharing that, but they're feeling uplifted because all their problems are going to be solved just real soon. And another is that they go dark, they ghost everybody, they won't return calls, and then I do think either we do or we send the cops to go knock on the door and see what's going on. And like you say, they're going to be mad, but they also are going to feel the curing that comes with that, and then we can honestly say, well, then answer your phone. I've actually left that message. If I don't hear back from you in 30 minutes, I'm going to call and have a welfare check sent to you. Oh, okay. I'll call you back. And very often it's like you said, it's a little bit of an overreaction, but we're talking about life and death stuff here,
Thank you. And that's really it, right? It's like, what would it be like for you guys out there listening? What would it be like for you to be a part of a community that gives enough of a shit about you to call the cops if they think that you're going to hurt yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, ooh, that feels like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. But there is a level of care there that's kind of rare these days.
Yeah.
What are some other, you kind of touched on this, but what are some other things that we can look for in our men's groups or in our lives as kind of signals to ask the question?
Well, for me, and partly it has from being a social worker for a long time and developing the sort of the subtle knacks of noticing, but often men will go silent, or they'll feel hopeless, or they'll talk about their problems, and they'll talk about, but I don't see a solution. And one of my favorites is, Viktor Frankl responded. He said, "Well, what's the point? What's the point of life?" And he said, "Well, that's the wrong question. The question is, what's the point of your life? And you get to decide." And actually, I'm not sure that's going to always help somebody who's suicidal, but it does point it out that it's not out there that's the problem. It's something in here. And I've noticed that men will sometimes go silent or hopeless, or sort of start acting hopeless, like not being able to get up and go to work, maybe not be able to, do their laundry, show up in group all dirty, and, personal hygiene is falling by the wayside, and don't really want to talk about anything because what's the point? Well, and then if we can find out, I always say, if you can find out what a man loves, you can save his life. And it's not always what you might think. So, and in all the years I've, I had a friend who was a suicidologist, and he said that in mental health, there are those who've had patients who suicide and those who will. It's almost inevitable. And I've had a couple of really sad, situations where a patient has suicided. And I've also had a couple of really good successes by just having them do the verbal no harm contract. I remember one man who came to me who said, well, as long as I can work, I'm not going to commit suicide. But if I can't work, I'm probably going to do that. And I said, well, would you make a commitment? If that happens, will you come talk to me? So almost exactly 1 year later, he came back and said, well, I made this contract with you about not hurting myself until I came and talked to you. So what do you got? And so then it kind of switches the pressure. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, you drove over here. Can you follow me over here to this treatment center, and then we just got him assessed and put in. But had he not done that, had I not had that commitment, to talk about it, then he might have been gone.
In the DBT world, which I have some familiarity with, this idea that that separation of time and how fundamentally important that separation of time is, the delay is between I am nothing but these thoughts. I am nothing but this cycle that's happening in my head. I am nothing but these beliefs that I have driving, to can we postpone that long enough that you can take one step away from that and say, oh, those were thoughts, and now I am having different thoughts.
Yeah. Or what you hear men say, you ask them, why are you still involved with the Mankind Project? And they'll always say connection. So it's also just grabbing that rope that was thrown out to you. Okay, instead of drowning, I'm going to grab this rope and see what happens, And it's sometimes that simple. I told him I would call him, so I'm going to call him, And that gives you an opportunity, and not to put too much responsibility on the person that answers, because there's all kinds of, now there's a 988 suicide crisis line nationally, as well as whatever's available in your community. It's a good idea for an I group to have some of those ideas on hand, because you never know what's going to happen. And as long as the man's reaching out and willing to grab hold of a rope, it's okay. You can work with it. And it's maybe it's really bad for him. Maybe he's going through a bad divorce or a bankruptcy or loss of a child or something really horrific. But having lost my wife 2.5 years ago to a really bad disease, I didn't become suicidal because I had a group of men that would hold me. And I did everything in that group. I, beat up pillows and yelled and screamed and cursed God and all the stuff that you do when you are faced with something like that. And so I came out on the other side feeling like, I have a group of men that saved my life, and that's priceless.
Thank you. Let's talk about being survivors. Let's talk about, as you said, right? You were either somebody who knows somebody who is suicided, or you will be. And something for many of us who have been around when other people in our lives have died by suicide, there's a guilt thing that happens with a lot of us. So talk some about that, survivor guilt, or
it's one of the biggest incentives to go ahead and ask the question, because the guilt that you will have a lot of hard time getting over is if you didn't ask the question and they suicide and you thought about it. Now, that didn't mean it was your fault, because they obviously had already decided. But if you don't ask the question, you didn't offer what you could. And if you do ask the question and they suicide anyway, you're going to feel like you didn't do enough. For the typical survivor's guilt of surviving any loss is to say, well, why not? Why wasn't it me? Or why didn't I do more? Or what could I have done that would have changed the inside? And, when people are determined to commit suicide, they do keep it secret. They don't talk about it. They are determined to do it. So really talking about the people who are just want some relief. They want somebody to care. So that we can intervene on. When somebody's totally convinced that that's the only way out, you're not going to stop it, but you can feel better that you tried, even if it didn't work. And the survivor guilt, especially if it's a partner or a loved one, is, the question is like, I don't feel like I did enough. Well, did you do everything you knew how to do? maybe you didn't know that you should have asked these questions. Now you know. And that's why it's good to talk about it. Like many other mental health problems, talking about it doesn't hurt anybody. Information doesn't hurt people. It's what they do with the information.
And sunshine being the disinfectant kind of idea, right? Shining a light into it.
Yeah.
To see what's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's an easy downward slope into. I think about shame as oftentimes toxic shame is taking on other people's or systems' values that you didn't actually choose.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just going to say the encouragement, which is don't take on shame from value systems that are out there, like you didn't do it, you didn't do blah, 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 or any kind of moral judgments about like that's something that we can get tied up in as moral judgments about people who died by suicide or about suicidality. It's like, no, just say no.
Yeah. And there is a part of this that I want to sort of say a disclaimer about. There are people who consciously decide to end their life because of some chronic health problem or deterioration. And they've just decided to do that, and they make it, and they do it with the support of their family and friends, because it's the quality of life. I mean, if their quality of life, life is precious, but when it gets to a certain point where death seems like a relief, then, maybe so. I didn't know if my wife would ever get to that point. She never did, but I do know that there are people, and I've gotten letters from people who said, I'm going out on this date, and that's the way it is. And I don't have the same feeling about that. Like I should stop them, and you can kind of tell whether they're just desperate or they've made a decision consciously, with the support of people around them, So there is that, and yet to assume that there's nothing I can do, that's almost kind of mirroring the helplessness that they have, Well, you're going to commit suicide. Well, there's nothing I can do about it,
Thank you. So we will have, I'll say look in the show notes. We will have links to the IASP.
IASP.
IASP. We will have links to some of these national resources and links where you can find resources for your state. And Julien Devereux, how should folks within the Mankind Project reach out to you if they want to do this process?
They can reach me at my MKP email address, juliendevereux@mkp.org, and or through connection with Boysen, but I think that my email would be fine. Yeah, and I'd be happy to do it. I really get excited. I have a wonderful time. It's a beautiful process. It'll brighten up. It'll turn the light on brighter in your eye group.
There you go. So if you want to turn the light on brighter in your eye group, there is an invitation for you. Julien, it's really lovely to be with you. Thank you for your wisdom. There are some great quips and clips that we can take out of this episode. And but wait, I have you on the phone, so I have to record you saying something that I have repeated I don't know how many times over the course of the last decade, and it begins with give to what?
Is what?
Give to what you love.
Oh. Let's see. Give to what you love is an act of service. That's what I try to do.
Give to what you love as an act of service. That is Julien Devereux. I took that one on in 2014, and I have repeated it I don't know how many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Julien, and thank you for giving to what you love as an act of service.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's really been great, and I hope I get a lot of emails and a lot of requests. I'll do it. I'm retired. I got nothing else to do, so.
Thank you, brother.
All right.
This
Take
has
care.
been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So, my friend, pick up the pen, and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.
Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind Podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.